بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I pray that you are all well. I pray that you and your families are in the best state of health and iman. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you all for tuning in for this session. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow this talk to be a means of His acceptance and acquiring His pleasure, and most importantly His mercy. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in beneficial knowledge. Allahumma ameen. Brothers and sisters, tonight inshallah ta'ala in our session, I have the intention to really shed some light on a topic that is quite often mentioned throughout our rich Islamic traditions. When we look through the Quran and we look through the Sunnah, we will find that this topic is often and continuously presented to us as a form of reminder. And remember, وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ ذِكْرَى تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and remind the people as the reminder brings benefit to the believer. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring benefit into our lives. This topic or this characteristic or this quality is often encouraged by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's something that will certainly bring benefit to all of us, both in this life and in the next. And it's something that when we acquire and when we adopt and when we execute and apply in our daily lives, it will only bring forth contentment and happiness. So this is something that really we should consider and try to learn more about. And I'm not speaking about any other attribute right now than the attribute of gratitude, and the ability and the capacity to recognize Allah and to recognize His blessings. To have this ability is certainly, a reason for us to be grateful. To be grateful, we must be grateful. That's a great thing, subhanallah. And when we seek, betterment in our lives, there's no better place to go to than the Quran itself, because ultimately it is the one who created us who is speaking to us through the verses of the Quran. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He presents to you and I the reality of humanity. And this is something very important for us to understand. In the first few verses of Surah Al-Insan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really gives us some insight, where He says, He begins the verse or the chapter by posing a question. هَلْ أَتَى عَلَى الْإِنسَانِ حِينٌ مِنَ الدَّهْرِ لَمْ يَكُنْ شَيْئًا مَذْكُورًا. Has there ever been a time, or was there a time where man was not even mentioned? Man was not even apparent. Man was not even around. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here, He's making a point that there was a time that you and we did not even exist. We were nothing. We were absolutely nothing. And then in the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions the greatest blessing that He has bestowed upon us, where He says, إِنَّا خَلَقَنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِن نُطْفَةٍ أَمْشَاجٍ نَبْتَلِيهِ فَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. And then He says, we created you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's telling us, we created you. I created you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from absolutely nothing, from something very insignificant. فَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. That when He created you, He gave you the capacity to hear. He gave you the faculty of hearing. He gave you the ability to see. This is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But remember, with gift and with blessings come responsibilities. And the responsibility is actually found in the following verse, where He goes on to say, إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلَ. That He has also given us a clear path. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's telling us, I've given you sight. I've given you the ability to hear. And at the same time, I've given you a straight path. Inna hadaynahu sabila. It is a path of righteousness. Is it a path that shows us really how to live our lives? You know, we need to know how to live our lives in order to live the best life. And it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who tells us. It is Him who tells us what is good and what is bad. It is Him who tells us what is haram and what is halal. It is Him who tells us what is beneficial and what is harmful. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has laid out this path for you and I only for our benefit in this life and even more so in the next. Inna hadaynahu sabila. But the result here is, the reality is, there's only two types of people in this life. Imma shakira wa imma kafura. There's no third category here, brothers and sisters. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, He's given us these different faculties. He's given us the ability to think. He's given us the ability to hear. He's given us the ability to see. He's giving us the ability to love. All of this is from Allah. And He's given us a clear path. But at the end of the day, there will be people who recognize these blessings of Allah. There will be people who understand that the source of all of this is from Allah. Or there will be people who are completely ignorant of this. And that ignorance is only due to their arrogance. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to rid us, number one, of ignorance and to rid us of arrogance. Because arrogance, my dear brothers and sisters, is the worst thing that we can carry in our hearts. It is a disease that prevents us from doing good. It's not just a sin in itself, but it extends to disabling us in performing other deeds. There's no way an arrogant person can thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we learn about this even in the chapter that I'm sure we all read today, Surah Al-Kahf, right? When we read about the man, the arrogant man in his two gardens, he was not thanking Allah because his heart was full of arrogance. Shaif halu. He saw himself as being, the Almighty. But it is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is the Almighty. So again, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to rectify our hearts from any arrogance, from any ignorance. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala infuses our hearts with gratitude and appreciation. Allahumma ameen. You know, gratitude is huge. It's huge. So huge that it is a fundamental part of the purpose of why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us here in the first place. We all know the verse, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. We all know this. Our kids know it. We know it. Ibadah. That is a huge reason as to why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed us here on this earth. And without having the attribute or the characteristic or the quality of gratitude in our hearts, our ibadah towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always be deficient. It will always be deficient. There will be no way that you and I can worship Allah the way He deserves to be worshipped, or at the best, of our capacity, the best that we can put forth. There's no way we can put forth our best to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unless we have that attribute of gratitude. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُلُوا مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ مَا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ وَاشْكُرُوا لِلَّهِ إِن كُنْتُمْ إِيَّاهُ ta'budun. Right? Oh, you who believe, eat, enjoy, indulge in the pure in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided for you. Enjoy it. But at the same time, washkuru lillah. But at the same time, when you're enjoying your money and you're enjoying your wealth and you're enjoying, your house and the safety and all of these things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, washkuru lillah, and show your gratitude to Allah in kuntum iyyahu ta'budun. If you really are worshipping Him, that's a sign of true worship, of true servitude. That when Allah gives you, you take it, you accept it, you appreciate it, and you worship Him by appreciating it. Again, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be grateful for the things we know He has given us and for the things we don't even recognize. Subhanallah. That is how generous Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. The majority of things that Allah has given us, we didn't even ask Him for it. But He gives it to us and He continues to provide for us. That's the generosity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with that generosity, it only can be met with gratitude. It only should and can be met with gratitude. You see, as we mentioned, if gratitude is a fundamental component of our worship, we learn something. We learn that this is how the shaitan tries to impact our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negatively. You see, the shaitan, his goal for you and I is to make us disbelief, is to make us turn away from Allah. That is his ultimate purpose. You know, sin after sin after sin. الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ. The ultimate objective, the main goal is to make us turn away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, Iblis, he turned away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He turned away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he did not prostrate to Adam. فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ لَمْ يَكُنْ مِنَ السَّاجِدِينَ. It is apparent, it is mentioned to us over and over in the Quran. لَمْ يَكُنْ مِنَ السَّاجِدِينَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala carries a discussion with Iblis in the heavens. And he's asking Iblis, you know, what deterred you? What, made you turn away from, prostrating? مَا مَنَعَكَ أَلَّا تَسْجُدْ إِذْ أَمَرْتُ قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْ خَلَقْتَنِي مِنْ نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتُهُ مِنْ طِينٍ. We know the situation. But then after the reason and after why Iblis presents to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala why he chose not to follow him, he then goes on to make a request. Like the nerve, right? The nerve of shaitan. Like, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to follow you. I'm just going to deny you. Right? And then he goes on to say, قَالَ أَنذِرْنِي إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَالَ إِنَّكَ مِنَ الْمُنذَرِينَ. And then Iblis says, قَالَ فَبِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي لَأَقْعُدَنَّ لَهُمْ صِرَاطَكَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. Now listen to this. Iblis is saying, oh Allah, because I am astray and because I am distant from you, لَأَقْعُدَنَّ لَهُمْ صِرَاطَكَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. I am going to sit on that path that we mentioned, إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلَ. He's going to sit on that path, Iblis. لَأَقْعُدَنَّ لَهُمْ صِرَاطَكَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. I'm going to make sure that they are going to be attacked. And it's not just some simple attack. The shaitan knows how to attack. Right? لَأَقْعُدَنَّ لَهُمْ صِرَاطَكَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ ثُمَّ لَآتِيَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. This is the point, brothers and sisters. This is the point. The goal of shaitan is to make you and I ungrateful. وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. And you will find that the majority of your slaves will not be grateful. Now we have a choice, brothers and sisters, in our lives. We can be from the minority or we can be from the majority. وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. In Surah Al-Mulk, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, قُلْ هُوَ الَّذِي أَنْشَأَكُمْ وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ قَلِيلًا مَا تَشْكُرُونَ. You know, to be able to be amongst those who show gratitude to Allah is an honor. Because Allah Himself is telling us, قَلِيلًا مَا تَشْكُرُونَ. Only a few of you, only a few of us will truly be grateful for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessings and His bounties. Only a few. So again, we continuously and consistently have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, allow my heart to be full of gratitude. I have so much to be thankful for in my life. I have so much to be thankful for in my life. But one of the things that we find that actually causes us to go the opposite way, and this is especially amongst the youth, and especially for us living, in the West, is this feeling of entitlement. This feeling of entitlement. And, this idea that we believe that we deserve everything that we have, right? I deserve everything that I have. I work hard. I wake up in the morning. I sacrifice time with my family. I sacrifice my sleep. I sacrifice doing the things that I want to do, right? And I go out and I earn wealth, right? And I come home and I build my home and I purchase my car and I buy my groceries and I go on vacation. I earn this. This is mine. Brothers and sisters, this is a very dangerous mentality when it comes to showing gratitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In reality, we do not deserve anything. If the reason you deserve your wealth is because you work hard, brother, sister, I hate to break it to you, but there are people who work twice as hard as you and only make a fraction of what you make. There are people who go out from morning to evening, and this work is not easy, and they make nothing. To say that I deserve what I have because I work hard is to say that they do not deserve what I have because they don't work hard enough. That does not make sense. What we have is from Allah. What we have is from Allah. ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ ذُو الْفَضْلِ الْعَظِيمِ. If Allah has given you something, it's not because you deserve it. It's because it is the fadl of Allah upon you. It is the grace. It is the bounty of Allah upon you. So whether you make minimum wage or you're making $1 million a year, that gratitude should always be there for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there are people who will never see this in their lives. So we must be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we can't feel this, entitlement. We are not better than anybody. We are not more deserving than anybody. It is the fact that Allah has given to us. And if we do not use these blessings in a way that is pleasing to Allah, then these blessings aren't really blessings, but they're punishments. And the first way to use a blessing in the cause and in the way of Allah is to thank Him for it. That is the prerequisite. That is the first step in using the blessing of Allah. Is saying, Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this to me. Right? We live our lives, man. Like the Prophet ﷺ, he says in a beautiful hadith, if you are to wake up in your home safe, healthy, and with enough sustenance for the day. I'm not talking about for a week or for a month or for a year. I mean, some people, they go out, they're stockpiling everything. Their basement is full of cans and non-perishable food items that will never see the food bank, right? The Prophet ﷺ is telling us something. Let's look at the perspective here. If you wake up, you all have all woken up today in your homes, walillahi alhamd, safe, because your house is the place to be in order to stay safe these days. Safe, healthy, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep you all healthy and your family healthy. And have enough sustenance for the day. فَكَأَنَّمَا حِيزَتْ لَهُ الدُّنْيَا. That is what the Prophet ﷺ is saying. It is as if Allah has given you the world. And we're sitting here complaining. We're complaining that we're sitting in our houses, safe. Right? With all the food that we can eat. Some of you guys are going to be coming out of your houses. Oh my goodness. I can't wait, inshallah ta'ala, once, this is all over, bi'idhnillah. The gyms, mashallah, they're going to be the best business. Everybody's going to be buying a membership to the gym. Everybody. Because everyone's just eating and sitting back and eating, complaining. We're eating and we're complaining and we're sitting in our houses safe and healthy and we're still complaining. And we're not saying alhamdulillah. This is a problem with our heart. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clear my heart and clear your heart. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala infuse the attribute of gratitude in our hearts. Right? So we're talking about the importance of wanting to increase the ability to show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, he mentions something very beautiful in his classical work of Madarij al-Salikin. He mentions a beautiful, some beautiful action points in which we can all, adopt and apply in our lives. He says, in order for an individual, for a true believer to present true gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be amongst الشاكرين, right? نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى يجعلنا من الشاكرين, to be amongst a person of true gratitude, then they should consider 4 points or 4 criteria. Right? If you really want to be grateful, then listen to this advice of Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah. He's saying, in order to be a true grateful servant, there are 3 things that you must consider and do. The first of which is presenting your gratitude to Allah by recognizing the blessing from the heart. The heart is the nucleus of everything. What is in the heart will ultimately manifest into everything else. So he begins with the heart. And he says, in order to show true gratitude to Allah, then that blessing must be recognized in the heart. اعتراف النعمة بالقلب. Right? Now, how does a person recognize a blessing from the heart? Number 1, we recognize that the source of all blessings is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That everything that we have, ultimately, the ultimate source was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, when somebody gives us something, it comes from one hand to another. But Allah is only using that person as a means to deliver that blessing to you. That source is from Allah. Without Allah, that person cannot give you anything. As the Prophet ﷺ said, if this whole ummah were to gather to give you something and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not decree it, they would never be able to give it to you. And if this whole ummah tried to take something away from you and it wasn't decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would never be able to take it away from you. So it all goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we recognize this in our hearts, then that is recognizing the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it is from Allah, that He is the ultimate source. And number 2, recognizing that Allah has blessed me over many. Every single person watching this right now at this moment is more blessed than many people in this world. Number 1, the ability to connect online, the ability to have internet, the ability to be safe in your house, the ability to be a Muslim and to be able to benefit from a kind word or a kind reminder. That is a blessing that many people don't have. And when we recognize just these small things, subhanallah, how easy it is to recognize the big things. So that is اعتراف النعمة بالقلب. That is the first step. The second step, he mentions, rahimahullah, he says to verbalize, النطق باللسان, to verbalize your gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when it comes to verbalizing your gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a general way that we can do it, and there is a specific way that we can do it. Now, when it comes to a general gratitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are many narrations and supplications that the Prophet ﷺ used to show his general gratification towards Allah subhanahu, his general gratitude, his general appreciation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A beautiful, beautiful, beautiful dua that we would actually recite right now during this time after Asr or after Maghrib is Allahumma ma amsa bi min ni'matin أو بأحد من خلقك فمنك وحدك لا شريك لك فلك الحمد ولك الشكر. This is a very general way that you and I can show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're saying, oh Allah, as you know, Allahumma ma asbaha bi min ni'matin, as the night has come in and these blessings have come forth, all of these blessings, Ya Allah, you are the source of all of them. Every blessing that every man and every woman has, you're the source of all of it, Allah. ما أمسى بي من نعمة أو بأحد من خلقك فمنك وحدك. It is you, Allah, only you, لا شريك لك, no associating partners with you. فلك الحمد ولك الشكر. فَلَكَ الْحَمْدُ وَلَكَ الشُّكْرُ. And there's a difference between hamd and shukr. You know, the scholars, they mention there's different, opinions on the difference between hamd and shukr. Some scholars, they'll say, yeah, you know what, there's no difference. Hamd is shukr and shukr is hamd. Some scholars will say, no, there is difference. And from these differences is that they will say that hamd is different than shukr. Because shukr is given when something is usually received. يعني الشكر مقابل الشيء. That if you give something to me, I would say shukran. Right? You help me out, I say shukran. You say a kind word, I say shukran. But I don't just walk around saying shukran, shukran, shukran for the sake of saying shukran. There has to be something given. Whereas hamd is even deeper. Whereas hamd is a gratitude that is shown to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it be during good times or times of difficulty. Right? Or times of difficulty. And this is why the scholars, they say there's a difference between a shakir wa shakur. There's a difference between a shakir and a shakur. Shakir is the one who is grateful during times of happiness and good, and when everything is cookie crunch, when everything is fine and dandy, right? Smooth sailing. They recognize it is from Allah and they appreciate it. But a shakur is different. It's unconditional gratitude. That you're unconditionally grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every circumstance in your life. If it's good, alhamdulillah. If it's bad, alhamdulillah. This is why the Prophet ﷺ teaches us that if we have a bad day, we always say, alhamdulillah ala kulli hal. Alhamdulillah in every situation and at every moment. This is the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ. This is a general way to show gratitude to Allah. A specific way to show gratitude to Allah is simply saying, after you eat, what do you say? Alhamdulillah. Right? Because the food could have been good or it could have been bad, right? Subhanallah, you say Alhamdulillah. Right? When you wake up, Alhamdulillah. Right? الذي أحيانا بعدما أماتنا وإليه النشور. Right? Alhamdulillah, your iman. Alhamdulillah, alladhi hadana lihada. Right? It's hamd. It's a specific shukr. It's a specific gratitude to Allah for a specific thing. So when we make, shukr verbally, we can understand it. Either we're making it from a general approach or from a specific approach. From a specific approach. And then finally, is the actions. So Ibn Qayyim is saying these are the three stations. Number one is recognizing in the heart. Number two is verbalizing it, whether it be specific or whether it be general. And then he goes on to say, al-amal bil-jawarih. Action. There has to be action. I want to take you guys back to Medina. Subhanallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take us back to the Prophet city al-Madinah al-Munawwara. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to pray in the blessed masjid of our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Let's go back 1400 years ago to the blessed city of al-Madinah al-Munawwara, where we find the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam in the darkest depths of the night, standing by himself, reciting Quran and praying, reading the verses of Allah, contemplating, until his eyes begin to shed tears and his beard becomes full of tears, until his feet become to swell and they begin to crack. Right? This is being narrated by who? This is being narrated by his wife, radiallahu anha. She's there. And she sees this. Aisha, she sees this, radiallahu anha. And she asks the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, O Prophet of Allah, why do you endure so much hardship when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already pardoned you for that which has passed and that which will come? And he looks at his wife, radiyallahu anha, and he says to her, and he teaches her, and he says, أَفَلَا أَكُونَ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. Oh my wife, shall I not be a grateful servant? The Prophet ﷺ is showing us here how to thank Allah through action. By standing up in the middle of the night when everybody else is sleeping, leaving your sleep, that which you love, sacrificing it and giving it to Allah, waking up just because you want to say, Alhamdulillah, أَفَلَا أَكُونَ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. Shall we not be grateful servants to Allah and show this gratitude through our actions? If Allah has given us time, let's give that time back. Volunteer. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us wealth, and we have a lot of wealth, and we see that people are struggling, right? People are struggling, individuals are struggling, households are struggling, Islamic institutions are struggling, masajid are struggling. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us wealth, show your gratitude. Let us show our gratitude by giving back what Allah has given us, only to receive more back from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَئِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. That's a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah has given you strength, help the weak. Allah has given you knowledge, teach those who are ignorant. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, the ability to aid. مَنْ كَانَ فِي عَوْنَ أَخِيهِ كَانَ اللَّهُ فِي عَوْنِهِ. The one who is in the favor or in the benefit of his brother, then Allah is in the benefit of that individual. Because it's a sign of gratitude to Allah, that you're using what Allah has given you, and you're using it and you're giving it to others only to receive back from Allah greater amounts of that blessing. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ما في أكبر منه, ما في أجود منه, ما في أرحم منه. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no one greater to him, more generous than him, more kinder than him. Allow us to seek this from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during these times of difficulty, and allow us to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our hearts, and allow us to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our statements. And allow us to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by being people who actually do something. Brothers and sisters, I want to end this short talk today with this final piece of advice. One of the hardest times to really present gratitude is during times of difficulty. There's no doubt. Right? Because sometimes we don't know how to handle that difficulty, and it affects our iman. And gratitude, it requires iman. But when you find yourself in a position of difficulty and hardship, and you find yourself falling short in your gratitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I want you to think of two things. Number one, that alhamdulillah, that fitna and that musibah and that hardship was not in my deen, was not in the most valuable thing that I possess. That Allah, He can test me in my wealth, He can test me in my health, He can test me, in any other thing. He can test me in my family. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَثَمَرَاتٍ. Right? He can test us in these things. But as long as He's keeping our iman intact and healthy, we have to thank Him, because it is the greatest blessing. Right? Alhamdulillah, everything comes and goes, but iman needs to stay. It cannot go, it needs to stay. And number two, my dear brothers and sisters, regardless of what we're going through in our lives, there's always someone else who is going through more. Regardless of what difficulty we are facing, hardship we are facing, struggle we are facing, there's always, and there will always be, somebody in this world who is going through a more greater difficulty and hardship, trial or tribulation than we are. And we have to recognize that and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for not putting us in that situation. Because the Prophet ﷺ teaches us that if you look at people, don't look at those above you. If you live your life going on Instagram and going on Facebook and comparing your life with, this facade that many people like to present on social media, you will never be grateful, because all you are doing is looking up, right? Or up, right? But if you look at those below you, you look at those who have no jobs, who have no shelter, who have no security, who have no health care like we do, alhamdulillah, here in Canada, walillah alhamd, we will always be grateful. Regardless of the situation outside, we will always show our gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Brothers and sisters, it is the last hour now here of Maghrib in the day of Jum'ah. And it's a very blessed time. First and foremost, Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad. May the peace and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon the greatest of messengers, the greatest of prophets, Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. أكثروا بالصلوات على النبي. Continue making your salawat upon Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam during this time. Number one. Number two, when we sign off, when you log out, take a second and take a moment and show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number three, make dua. Inshallah ta'ala, this is a blessed time. وَالدُّعَاء فِيهِ مُسْتَجَابٌ. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst those who show gratitude, not only during good times, but through bad times as well. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extracts any type of arrogance from our hearts. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rectifies the affairs of the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to come out of this difficulty that we are facing in our lives, whether it be COVID, whether it be family issues, whether it be health issues, whether it be financial issues. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to come out of this grateful. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Next week, inshallah, at the same time, we will have another halaqah, we will have another lecture, or not a lecture, just a small talk, inshallah ta'ala. The topic will be the struggle for sincerity. And sincerity is important, especially with Ramadan on its way. We need to rectify our hearts and think more of our hearts and ask ourselves, how am I going to get my heart prepared for Ramadan? Instead of asking myself, how am I not going to eat being stuck at home during the month of Ramadan? Let us work on the priority, which is our hearts. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rectify our affairs. May Allah bless you all. Jazakum Allah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.